On behalf of the Observer Research Foundation, I'd like to welcome you to this iteration of the National Security Dialogue. Today, what we plan to do is to discuss, use the Kargil War as a platform, 25 years since the Kargil War. But we are not going to stick really to the Kargil War as such, but to look beyond, to use that as a kind of a platform to look ahead and to look at, what is the condition of our surveillance and reconnaissance regime? What were the kind of lessons of the Kargil War that has guided defense reforms subsequently? How might emergence of new technologies transform India's response to Kargil-like intrusions? And of course, the panelists will examine whether Indian forces have evolved in terms of force integration, jointness, interoperability, particularly concerning Pakistan and China. What is the status of India's theatre command reforms? Where are they stuck? Have India's intelligence reform met recommendations of the Kargil Review Commission? So we have with us Air Chief Marshal, retired R.K.S. Bhadoria. And particularly, I have requested him to tell us something about the Air Force and its position in the force integration plans that we have. We have General Raj Shukla, who's a member of the UPSC and former Army commander of the Army Training Command. We want his opinion over the Army's dominance in this security system. See, when we are looking at integration, how do we promote service equality? We have Ambassador Leela Ponappa, former Deputy National Security Advisor. We have Karthik Bomkanti, Senior Fellow, Observer Research Foundation. And we have Dr. Tara Kartha, who's the author and former director, NSCS. And so we'd like to hear from Tara when Tara's unfortunately, she's just on her way and hopefully will be here to tell us a little bit about how the NSCS has functioned since then. Given the time constraints that we have, I'm going to be pretty strict and try to request people to speak just absolutely between 10 and outside 12 minutes, because what happens otherwise we'll go beyond and we'll have no dialogue. No dialogue will be left. And so don't mind if I do point that out when your time gets over. So I just wanted to start with talk a little bit about the intelligence reforms that took place. The problem is that those intelligence reforms were published in the GOM report, but they were redacted. So there was actually no published version. The GOM report is published, so we know all about the CDS and we know about the Defense Intelligence Agency and MAC, Multi-Agency Center, but we don't know this actual substance. And the substance, was subsequently brought out by the deputy to the NSA, Satish Chandra, who wrote a long article. See, but that's not very well known. So definitely, the government, the GOM, the group of ministers, this was formed after the Kargil Review Commission report, recommended the need for more coordination and jointness amongst various agencies. This is a major problem. I think all people who have worked in government will realize that jointness in the intelligence agencies is a major problem. Second is, each agency was provided with a charter. They were given a specific charter saying that this is your charter and you stick to it. That they have not stuck to it in many cases is another story, but we won't go into that. Then it was said that the IB should not be seen as an appendage of the Home Ministry. See, just because it's physically located in the same building, that doesn't mean that it's an appendage of the Home Ministry. See? And it's in view of the increasing high tech in intelligence collection, analysis, and dissemination, a new organization called the National Technical Facilities Organization, which was subsequently renamed the National Technical Research Organization, NTRO, was set up. Then there were coordination groups, technical cooperation, at the highest level, apex level, technical cooperation group to get together when you're buying expensive equipment. The NSCS was given the task of intelligence assessment. This again is something which has not been followed up because the intelligence agencies don't like to be given tasks by other people. They want to self-task. But again, as I said, I won't go into that. The IB was designated as the premier counterintelligence agency. Then a new defense intelligence agency was set up, strategic military intelligence. And its head was the principal military intelligence advisor to the defense minister, chairman, chiefs of staff committee, and the defense secretary. Finally, the GOM recommendation made the national security advisor as the coordinator of intelligence. So he's officially the coordinator of intelligence as the intelligence coordination group, or what is called the National Intelligence Board, NINTB, National Intelligence Board. He's also designated as the supervisor of the NTRO. So these were the kind of things, but as I said, many of them were not followed up. So in any case, we'll start this discussion now, and I've told all the speakers here that they can be range quite freely, but look forward rather than look back towards the Kargil War. So we will start with Air Chief Marshal Bhadoria.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the background, and I'm glad we are not revisiting Kargil in detail as to what happened, how it happened, and all the lessons. And because so much has been discussed and so much has been spoken about it, that we are revisiting the same things over and over again. And I'm really happy to see the guiding questions that you have given in terms of really address where we are, what happened from Kargil to Galwan. After Kargil, why did Galwan happen at all? Happening Galwan was in China's hand, but could we have known or reacted or prepared a little earlier? Were we in some elements surprised? As a nation, as defense services, where are we today? And more importantly, what's the future? Are we doing adequately for the future? I think if you have to start from Kargil, the essentials were, in terms of ISR, what you mentioned, ability to have complete visibility across spectrum. In terms of capability building, all services, real kinetic capability, real overall combat capability, equipment, high altitude capability, doctrines, training, ability for services or agencies to work together. That means being on the same platform, how fast we can share information. Some of the actions taken he's already covered. Are we in ideal situation now? Structural reforms, a big focus area of the GOM after Kargil. A lot of work has happened in that, and what's the future? And I think the underlying thing in all this is, as an industry, as Make in India, as Atmanirbharta, or as our own capability, where are we? To my mind, that is the crux. So if we have to travel from Kargil time to now, if Kargil we were dependent on patrols and physical holding of positions in the hills in close to LOCs, and Air Force depending more on electronic intelligence and signal intelligence, with ISRO telling the services that, look, don't talk to us about defense capability. Don't ask us about what ISRO can do for defense. If people in uniform had gone to ISRO, they would hesitate to even interact. That was our culture as an industry. 20 years later, Galwan, we still ended up buying satellite pictures at times even through open sources, or satellite pictures from other countries, other satellites. We had still not built up enough capability of our own, although capability existed. We have reasonable capability of our own mapping, but real-time updates, the rate of update, we still weren't there 20 years. And this being the background, I want to concentrate on why this has happened. Very clearly, the basic lesson of Kargil was, apart from capability, which all three services started to modernize and looked at, was ISR capability. That today is the requirement for the future. It would be, let's say, air-based, UAV-based. A lot of UAV assets have come up, and essentially space-based, satellite-based. Because in peacetime, that is the only way that you can do some surveillance and recce on a sustainable basis on something that we can afford. On the entire UAV spectrum or airborne spectrum or intelligence spectrum on electronic side, we have progressed a fair amount, largely based on DRDO. Some of the progresses made, some bit on industry side, but heavily dependent on foreign countries still for all the sensors and largely majority of the capabilities. So 20 years, we still could not develop enough of our own to have a capability, at least to know what is happening. Forget 24/7 visibility on our LOC, LAC. Okay, it is even when you desire to know and map a particular area with your own assets or your own UAVs in the air, even that capability, although UAVs has come up a lot between Air Force and Army, overall, a lot of it imported. There is a guiding question on why are we there? Is it technology? Is it resources? Or is it policy or complacency? I think that is what you mentioned. And I feel that is the crux issue. Technology, of course, is an issue. Resources, we've been putting resources. So while resources, everybody says we are short, but we've been putting resources all into foreign assets and not our industry when the time mattered. And the real thing lacking to my mind was the drive that has now come in terms of Make in India, Atmanirbharta, indigenization, which has started to show results and we have started to export. Actually should have started or was meant to start and was the intent right in the beginning of this century. So immediately after Kargil, this was one of the lessons and we were to achieve it. But we have remained in such a grip of build to print and license production as an industry that it is so difficult to break out. And even now what has happened is just the tip of the iceberg. We have just started to indigenize. We have just built up capability. In spite of building a LCA, which is absolutely 4.5 generation, we still have got forced to import a large UAV. So a fighter aircraft, which is much ahead in technology, we can build, our industry can build, but we didn't put enough money towards UAV and therefore we cannot build a simpler platform. We never put sensors money because all our big industrial players and entire ecosystem continue to put this in the hands of foreign players. So the point I make is that we never put enough resources in our industry. We never did that leap of faith, which we should have done 2 decades ago. And unless we put money, which we have started to put now, into our own industry, you cannot build this capability. So even with this change that has happened with Make in India, where are we today? We still don't make UAVs of the class of Mail and Hail. We have many which are on the verge of succeeding, but on the platform side, on ability to fly, but not on the sensors. We still don't have enough capability in satellites, although many satellites have come up now, capability has come up. The last satellite launched by Tata on a mapping side, touted as the Indian, spy in the sky. Actually, the sensors are all imported. The entire capability is imported. And when I asked Tata that, look, why didn't you get into Indian sensors? They said, no, there's nobody ready. So this question of nobody ready would always remain unless you put money. If I know of at least 10 startups and 10 medium size who are already building on sensors. So all you have to put is put money there and it will happen. So this is where we are as an industry. We, to my mind, are still in the grip of, this combination of situation where we have started to put money in our industry, but still not taken a complete jump. And unless we do it fully, it will not happen. The examples I want to give is on the fighters aircraft, once the LCA succeeded, we have started to put on Mark II on AMCA. The moment 250 aircraft contract is there, which is for Mark 1A, let's say 283 plus 97, you will find in year to come when about 80,000, 90,000 crore goes into industry, it has to progress. Similarly, all other systems, all other areas, and if, let me tell you, if this can succeed, there is no tech that we are now at the moment purchasing, except for some very niche areas that cannot be done in India. So where we are today, to my mind, we should have been far ahead, but we have, as a system, I'm not blaming industry. It is to do with services, it is to do with ministry, it is to do with the industry, it is to do with the big industrial player who are equally responsible for jumping into foreign tech to build here and build to print and be happy with 10 to 15% margin rather than incubate good startups and good, tech development of people coming out of our institutes and build those systems. So tech-wise, I think this is my take. Other issue, I will quickly jump on structural reforms. I think on structural reform side, a lot has happened. And my previous thing on tech, we can discuss on questions. I don't want to spend more time on it, but there are many more issues to it. On the reform side, while General Shukla will cover more details, I will just touch upon some of the issues that he mentioned. When I spoke with CDS last, a lot of discussion has taken place between services, and they have reached common ground in terms of how the integrated theatre command will come up, and it's just a matter of time before it gets announced. CDS made an important point that they are looking at putting this into culture in the three services, and I couldn't agree more, because it is a culture and DNA that is more important. You can put three uniforms in a room, and if the culture hasn't changed, or they don't start talking the same language, it won't help. So that has happened. Cross-staffing has started to take place. So the initial signs of integration of a higher level are already there. And just a matter of time before structural reforms take place. The next issue important, I think, in this context is where are we headed? Especially if you look at China, forget about Pakistan. China, if we have to really tackle, I think we have to look hard into next-gen tech. We are still in many places, industry and services-wise, looking at what we should have had and continuing to, focus on that. The UAVs, the small quadcopters have become the new game. We really need to focus on the next-gen tech, the direct energy weapons, the space and cyber, the next generation of network-centric warfare, developing networks which are space-based, integrated for the three services from the word go. Bring in the quantum, secure your networks. The day quantum comes, all our current security would go. And similarly, in a manner, I'll just take a minute more, go into other tech which is futuristic. And that is where we can take a lead. And that is where I think a lot of energy from point of view of resources and attention should go from defense. What kind of war will we fight is the other issue. A real thinking needs to take place. The nature of war is changing, character is changing. How do we want to? And for that, what areas that need to develop? The only other point is to continue with the current thrust on indigenization and depending on our own industry. And I'm telling you, there are more forces against it rather than forces in favor, both within the country and outside. And this is an area that as a nation, as defense services, as ministry, everybody has to put their heart and soul and build it. And believe me, if we really put the money into our industry, it will show result. It's just a matter of resources putting in. Thank you. Rest, I think we can discuss during the question now.
You've given us a perspective of where we are. I would actually like to put it another way and say that we are in the midst of work in progress. In our this thing, whether there is achievement or not, I think it's fairly too early. Till 2021, the private sector was not allowed into the defense sector, so they have not had much of a chance, to prove themselves. So I think that it's a work in progress, and we still need time before we can judge success or failure. But now we'll go on with General Raj Shukla.
All right, so friends, ladies and gentlemen, the very thoughtful titling of today's panel discussion, Prediction, Preemption and Force Integration, with the lessons of Kargil as a backdrop, is actually a plea synonym for auditing India's current deterrence posture. Is it resilient enough? I mean, that's the key question. And I'll try and do precisely that. So the reforms that were set in motion by the Kargil Review Committee and the group of ministers, in my view, manifested in two tranches. In the first phase, we saw the setting up of headquarter IDS, CISC, the DIA. We saw, a rollout and streamlining of the DPP in response, I think, to General Malik's lament of fighting with what we have. We saw the setting up of the NTRO, so on and so forth, operationalization of the nuclear deterrent. So some very wide-ranging forward movement occurred, but in my view, it was not deep-seated enough. So we saw the second tranche, which, in my view, were far more significant, the very game-changing CDS-DMA, for two reasons. One, it corrected a skew in our whole CMR, civil-military relationship, and the government told the empowered CDS that here are your powers, now drive change through the national security system. Two, DRDO reforms. I never thought in my lifetime we would even initiate DRDO reforms. So the fact that DRDO reforms are having is a big thing. Corporatization of OFBs, defense coming out of the shadows of foreign policy, strengthening of the NSCS, in my view. We have opened up, critical technology and innovation pipelines, ISET and Indus X. And most importantly, I think Chief Marshal Bhaduria made this point of Atmanirbharta in defense, where what was different this time was that a definite attempt was made to, infuse innovation, energy, and enterprise through the private sector and startups. Now, this has started wonderfully well, in my view. There are some very good examples of Indian startups partnering with American firms, so on and so forth. But in the light of Ukraine, now just see what's happened in Ukraine. The changes in the character of war are the most fundamental and profound in recorded history. And I can, give you many examples from that. But what has happened is that from Ukraine, it's evident that private sector now is no longer, startups are not just vendors. They are full-fledged combat actors in targeting, surveillance, space, logistics, full-fledged combat. Think Starlink, Starshields, Palantir, Microsoft, Amazon, Huawei. These are the people who are driving technological innovation. I'll just give you one example. Look at Palantir. Alex Karp, in March 2022, walks across to Zelensky and says, President, just give me all your data. Give me all your data and I will give you all AI-enabled services free. And he's done that and taken that data to build his products for, global use. Now, this is the kind of stuff that is happening. Elon Musk, by switching off and switching on Starlink, enabled the targeting of Sevastopol and stopped it. Is he CEO of SpaceX or is he National Security Advisor? So given these changes, in our case, in my view, private sector startups are the only ones who can do technological innovation. The defense PSUs and all can just give you legacy systems. So thank God we started. But as Air Chief Marshal Bhaduria said, there's a long way to go. Now, the current CDS is on record, formally and also informally. Theatre commands, I'm told, are a done deal. But they are just the beginning of a deeper fleshing out series of seamless transitions, which are beginning to happen. And he chooses to call them next generation reforms. So let's stick to this. We are moving along the path of jointness, integration, cross-pollination. The final destination is civil-military fusion. So there's a long way to go. But there are measures being taken. For example, I'll give you some examples. In the staff college now, you have a joint division which has been set up to infuse this joint culture. A whole cadre of joint staff officers is being created, modeled on the German general staff. Now, if we actually get to do that in terms of talent, aptitude, training, They will drive further change into the defense services. And this is going to get linked to, tenanting of joint appointments, career advancement. So apart from these structural corrections, cultural transitions have come, because the real challenge is not theaterization. The real challenge is whether theaterization will manifest into combat power. In order to enhance multi-domain capacities, and I think this is a big move, steps are being taken to unlock data, secure that data in quantum and blockchain, develop these fusion pipelines, the contours of an integrated command post, data formatting, storage, securing this data in cloud, with the whole aim of shortening decision cycles and reducing margins of error. Now, this has begun. Now, given where the Indian military was, it's going to take long. But these are, very significant measures. And they are undergirded by an overarching vision. Now, this is important in my view, to structure an AI-driven, robotics-enabled military. And this is being done in distinct roadmaps and timelines. So 2027, 37, 47, these have been drawn after intense discussions. And this is an imperative, because without AI and robotics, you simply cannot get on top of the military food chain, the combat food chain. So steps are being taken to fuse sensors and shooters across domains, give a boost to precisionry from the tactical to the strategic realms, leverage hypersonic, so on and so forth. See, this problem about intelligence and surveillance is not being better than the past. It is being as good as the current. So from Kargil, our surveillance improved greatly. But when it came to Galwan, since we lacked persistent surveillance, we were once again found wanting. So the point today is that we have to so leverage technology so that we are ahead of change. And the whole aim is to build an integrated Indian military that can see far, hit accurately and with speed, with a decision-making and command and control system that is largely data-driven and AI-enabled. So these steps have started. But the fact is this, that you cannot have a Vikasit Bharat or a Vishwa Bandhu without a sophisticated, technologically enabled military instrument of calibrated deterrence. So these are all steps that are being taken. And other facilitation mechanisms like FUWAG, a future warfare group, has been created under a 3-star under headquarter IDS. Operational art is evolving alongside technologies, because with these changes, you have to see how forces will be orchestrated for combat. Not only gray zone, because in my view, the biggest danger with China is prolonged high-intensity combat. So, these things are happening. Attempts are being made to, churn the OODA loops at higher speeds, because any military man understands that is the key to combat ascendancy. There are upgrades happening in professional military education, because you have to, train officers for this. I would really commend to you the Indian Air Force's Warfare and Aerospace Strategy Program. I've personally seen it. Very new stuff is happening. In mid-September, under the CDS, there is going to be a rank-agnostic, integrated technology future warfare capsule. So I can give you a lot of data. This professional military education, the whole purpose is to get officers to master AI, chips, space, cyber, doctrinal shifts, operational transitions, because this is what the PLA is so good at. And if we have to match the PLA, this is happening. There are persuasion advocacy battles. I'll just give you one example. All this change will be of no use unless this happens. For example, with the CDS being established, the budgetary control must now shift to the CDS. If the funding of DRDO technologies continues to be with DRDO, we will once again get the technologies that DRDO chose to give us and not the technologies that we want. So the CDS has to become a high-level budget holder. And, such kinds of shifts are also taking place. So a lot of good is happening, but the devil, as we all know, is in the implementation, in the execution, in the details. And given the China threat, which in my view is enormous, and the huge changes in the character of war, which I said are the most fundamental in recorded history, we need to accelerate in terms of imagination, innovation, speed, scale. What the startups need are orders, orders, and orders. That is not happening in the manner that it should. When looked at from another lens, in my view, the Indian military is faced with 3 challenges today. One is of territorial combat, LAC-LC. The other is of strategic deterrence, and the third is of power projection. We must, of course, continue to resource the LAC and LC, not only in terms of the threat emanating from the Western Theatre Command China, but also along our Western horizons, as recent events tell us. There is no time to go into the details. But what is most urgent is the finessing of our strategic deterrence in terms of two metrics. Look at our air defense posture. Just see what happened on the night of 14th April and what protected Israel. The Iron Dome, Arrow 2, Arrow 3, American Aegis, fighters from UK, Jordan, USA, the whole sensor network of the Missile Defense Agency, regional layers of regional AD integrated for years by CENTCOM. Do we have the same air defense posture against a much more sophisticated PLA rocket force? I have my great doubts. And in tandem deterrence, it is high time we need a drone missile force, this integrated instrument of cutting-edge long-range precision, which targets China's east coast and not just a rock in Tibet, because that is where true deterrence will come from. So these are things that need to happen very fast. We can no longer be bashful of power projection. We need to weigh our options. Do we want to project into POK or project power across Malacca? Missilery, in-depth targeting, military partnerships to widen the swath of our surveillance picture. No nation can do it all by itself. You need wider partnerships and agreements. Next generation air dominance. Do we need stealth bombers that can penetrate deep into Chinese airspace? Because we are talking of being Vishwabandhu, Viksit Bharat and all these things should happen. Air Marshal Bhaduria will of course know better than this. It is also time to make a vigorous turn to the seas. Because plan has already got a 100-day sustainment in the IOR. It has got a 400-ship navy, the world's largest. They are not going to patrol Chinese coastlines. And once they break out of the island chains, they are going to be in the IOR. So if we don't act with speed, and don't mount a very robust challenge to counter such projection of plan into the IOR, a few years from now, we'll be faced with this prospect of a strategic squeeze, not only from the LAC, but also from the IOR. So what I'm saying in sum is that while a lot of good work is happening, it has happened, look at the scale of the challenges. They are only growing. I'll just take 2 to 3 minutes more. Insofar as the wider structures of Indian statecraft are concerned, it will be wise if we look carefully at these three issues in my view. One is look at the tectonic shift that is taking place in geopolitics. And I don't think India is adequately stirred up. If at one time it was the economy stupid, today it seems to be national security is driving geopolitics like never before. The arc of conflict is moving from Europe to West Asia, West Pacific, closer home. And today India is in a geopolitical sweet spot. We are enjoying a rare peace dividend, but we must make use of this time to step up our deterrence and our defense preparedness. Because come 27, 28, when we face a military crisis with China, there must be no regret that when we had the time, we did not do enough. This is what precisely USA is lamenting today. The USA is openly regretting it didn't do enough. Secondly, a dangerous contest is afoot between a crumbling old order, USA-led West, and a rivalrous new axis struggling to be born, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, which is with great strategic coordination across theaters is fragmenting American military power. This must force us to think through our choices. In my view, it will impact our wider strategic autonomy, and therefore we must take a careful look at this. Look at the state of our military-industrial complex and how important it is. I'll just give you, with some examples from Ukraine, or even before that, China. 2004, China's industrial capacities value added were half of that of USA. Today, they are twice that of USA. American studies now say that the Chinese military-industrial complex is 5 to 6 times more efficient and sophisticated than the Americans. Chinese. So unless wider industry develops, the military-industrial complex by itself will do nothing. I'll give you another example. If you neglect your military-industrial complex, if your statecraft atrophies, just before Advika was surrendered or a decision was taken to surrender Advika 3 to 4 months back in Ukraine, and I'm quoting the CIA Director Burns, no less, they did a survey or an audit of 2 Ukrainian infantry brigades. One had 15 artillery rounds left and the other 42 mortar rounds. We are talking of mighty USA. And yes, just 1 minute. So unless USA doesn't have 7 days of precision missiles, munitions to fight in Taiwan. We must look at our military-industrial complex, review our stockpiles, our inventories. We need to give firm demand signal, national champions, all this reforms in AID. And just last one point I'll make is about defense spending. See, I just saw the budget again today. It's 2.6 lakh crores, which is $95 billion. Now we have to understand, valor has its limits. Valor has to be resourced. Chinese defense budget, according to the American Enterprise Institute, is $900 billion. The official figure is 300, but even if you say 500 and you're spending 90, no matter what you do, the lag will grow. China this year increased its defense budget by 7.2% when its economy, I'm told, is growing at 3, some say 2, some say half. When we have the luxury of growing at 7%, if we do not spend adequately on defense, there will be dire consequences. The mathematics is very simple. So we must do all this. So just last 30 seconds, we've done well, the reforms have moved forward, but if we have to create credible deterrence in all the issues that I highlighted, we need to do far more. If we create this deterrence, China is not an irrational actor, it will back off. But if you don't create deterrence, you're going to invite aggression from China. And I will just leave with you with this last thought. Deterrence is, of course, costly. It costs money. But wars are costlier. Ask the Ukrainians. Thank you.
Broad sweep of your analysis and pointing to the critical issue of resources, because that is something when you talk of persistent surveillance, for example, that means money, meaning you have to have satellite systems, adequate satellite systems. With DRDO, I think Air Chief Marshal Bhadoria and you have spoken about it. The interesting thing is last October, I think we set up a committee, the Vijay Raghavan committee. They have come out with a report, but the DRDO is now resisting because it's a pretty drastic report, which means a breakup of the DRDO as we know it now. But it is a fact, and Air Chief Marshal Bhadoria will attest to it, that we do not have a single DRDO-made UAV in our service. Not a single DRDO-made UAV in our service. Whereas even countries like Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, and others have made their UAVs. No?
Not to forget the Houthis.
Not to forget the Houthis. Yes, that's true. In any case, we'll go on now, and I'll request Ambassador Ponnappa to make her remarks. And again, remember that please keep it as brief as possible because of the time factor.
Thank you very much for asking me to join this discussion. And I've heard the previous two speakers with great interest because I think everything that they have said points to the need to integrate concepts of national security into our national functioning. We are not here to do a postmortem on Kargil, but there were two takeaways from there which continue to be relevant. And I thought I would mention them. One is that intelligence should have no hierarchy. As it happens, I traveled through Ladakh when I was on the job and spoke to many colleagues in the armed forces, in the army particularly, also the ITBP and so on. And I was surprised at the notion that there was no confidence of what was coming in really going up the ladder. And in our own experience at the NSCS, we have seen that there are just too many cases of intelligence first going up a ladder before it comes down. This comes to the whole issue of jointness and the notion that we are all on the same side. In fact, instead of being departmental or in silos. And this is really a question of mindsets. Everything that we have heard now, the need to infuse technology, to need to finance startups, definitely a need to increase defense spending because we are an underspent nation on defense. Even in today's budget, I did a very quick thing, it's just about 2-point-something plus of % of our GDP. A country with India's reach, and the reach is not just our notion of our traditional neighbors, but really there's a need to redefine our entire neighborhood. There is a piece on this that I would be happy to share if anybody is interested. But the aftermath of Kargil. So you had the review committee whose signal recommendation was that there must be a comprehensive review of national security. That was the major recommendation. And the group of ministers followed. The structures were in place. The GOM report was supposed to be reviewed in 2006. And despite attempts to have it done, the okay was not given. Ultimately, we got the Naresh Chandra task force. And there again, Manoj, you have written extensively about it as a kind of fly on the wall, even though you were in a chair there. And I think there has been some progress there, but again, all pointing towards setting up essentially new bodies and bureaucracies, often with common membership. So the point is, what did that really do for us in terms of national security? Just taking into account the technological challenges and advancements of today, together with the ground realities of what we have vis-a-vis Pakistan and China by land and by sea, space, cyber. National security has to be treated as a holistic aspect of national development, not as an afterthought, not only crisis driven. You are best prepared when there is peace, so that we are not taken by surprise. The comment in the ORF paper about what was the reason for the failures at Kargil talked about complacency. And I think it was complacency because of a mismatch between professional ground assessment and, frankly, being carried away by optics. After all, before Kargil, you had the famous Lahore bus ride and so on and so forth. The political and the diplomatic optics should never mask the ground realities, the ground assessment, and the professional inputs that go into it. With regard to the integration of intelligence, Manoj, you've spoken at some length about it. There have been times, and I'm sure there continue to be times, I've been out of the system for a while, but you have to knock heads. It is amazing to what extent information is held back unless one draws it out. And this is true of equipment, high-tech equipment, and in terms of all the new areas that we need to develop in. And the notion that technology has to drive much of what we do, even though we deal with something as elemental as what we saw at Galwan a few years ago, becomes very vital. India tried to set up a semiconductor factory sometime in the 80s, if I remember right, at Chandigarh. It burnt down. We don't know why. Now we are talking about manufacturing our own chips, fab units, because that's where it all starts from. Because if you open up some of the equipment that we now have, as has been mentioned by both the Air Chief Marshal and General Shukla, they're made in China. Motherboards are made in China. This is where we have to start from. It's not enough to say that we have done all this, which means we have to set up the infrastructure, the grounding for developing these capabilities. I think the civil-military dialogue also requires great attention. This is something that I've always felt. From the Ministry of External Affairs, the Foreign Service, we've always had very close relations with defense, both within headquarters and in missions abroad. But broadly, I think if you go back to a very seminal book on defense that was written by a former Chief Defense Secretary, P.V.R. Rao, called Defense Without Drift, the opening paragraph talks about how at the time of independence, India's defense interests were a totally closed book to the political leadership. Even today, when I think of some of the kind of field situations that one has seen, the kind of awareness that should exist amongst our political leaders does not show itself. And that affects decision making. I do believe that it is high time that there be a standing committee of parliament on national security, drawn from relevant existing standing committees. Defense, certainly, home, external affairs, commerce. I mean, frankly, tomorrow, if you were to set up a Ministry of National Security, who do you think is going to give up their turf? I mean, this is how basic it gets, including internal issues of governance and identity, culture, all of which tend to show up in whatever social cohesion we are able to obtain to foster the kind of trust that we want to give to our educational and to our technological development. There was also talk about developing a cadre of specialists on national security drawn from among the civil services so that you could have cogent decision making, timely decision making. And here again, I mean, there are time tested methods within the government of India, and most of it relates to a sort of linear progression of decision making. Whereas it has been proven that when you have conjoint decision making by an empowered committee, decisions can really be taken very fast with very thorough and credible inputs. So essentially, national security cannot be an afterthought. It has to be built into our professional systems, not just amongst the armed forces, not just amongst intelligence, certainly throughout our economy and our industry. I've had the pleasure of working with some high-tech companies in Bangalore, where I am, in fact, right now. And they have developed indigenous systems, not necessarily drawing from the big boys like Ericsson or Cisco, but developing homegrown patents. And the kind of investment that Chief Marshal Bhadoria talked about into some of these startups, I do believe is very vital in order to develop these capabilities. But at the bottom line, there has to be ruthless honesty within our system, both of strengths and of weaknesses. I mean, you guys are experts at SWOT analyses. Unless we recognize those weaknesses, the strength of the Kargil Review Committee report was they said we are not on a witch hunt. We just want to know what happened and where the lacunae were. And then how do we go about it? I think likewise in today's situation, in terms of ground realities, in terms of recognizing that our maritime interests range all the way from the Mediterranean to the South China Sea. That's really the neighborhood we need to be looking at. That if there have been slip-ups, we need to talk about it instead of, there's no room for bravado in these matters, which is why I also believe that the National Security Council should include the leader of opposition from both houses so that the dialogue on national security is not politicized. It must be depoliticized so that everybody knows that they are talking the same language. Finally, communication about thinking, the strategies, the plans, the national agenda, if you will, needs to be communicated to the public. Otherwise, the kind of support that I think anybody in industry, in government, in the armed forces requires would be not quite as forthcoming as it could be. I mean, talking about the army, when I traveled through Ladakh, saw the films on Operation Vijay, saw the films on Operation Meghdoot. Which youngster today knows about these things? Why is it not being broadcast? We need national security studies in our universities so that it is integrated into thinking, not with paranoia, but just with awareness of the elements that go into it. And that, I think, would really make for greater professionals. Finally, my last word, all of this, in terms of communication, requires a doctrine. We do not have a national security doctrine. I can say without going into details that there have been drafts, many drafts. And for whatever reason, and this comes back to the political thinking and leadership, it has not been taken up. Even a draft doctrine put out for the public. We're not talking about the Constitution or our values and what we hope to do, but how the state shall act. It has to be a politico-strategic doctrine that talks about how India will deal with its challenges internally and externally. We have a nuclear doctrine. Why don't we have a national security doctrine? And I have always urged any forum that I've spoken to, draft one, put it out. Let there be a debate. Because unless we discuss what we are going to do with all the fancy things that we are now trying to do, there will be no clarity. We should not have any illusions about the threats from Pakistan and China, whatever the diplomatic optics, whatever the political optics, because the ground realities speak for themselves. And that must drive essentially how we progress towards comprehensive national security and comprehensive national power. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Ponnappa. You've given us a certain background and an in-depth look at the national security as an issue itself, and I think informed by your experience as the Deputy National Security Advisor. Now I'll request Dr. Tara Kartha, who is joining us online, to put forward her views. Tara, please keep it compressed because I'm already out of time in a certain way. But please, Dr. Kartha.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to keep it really short. I think I caught bits and pieces of what you all were saying because the connection here was very poor. I would warn you against going overload on the acronyms. You know, the kind of language which we pick up on this type of warfare, this is what we need. And that is this is a discussion in terms of Kargil, what we learned and what we should do hereafter. I really like what Mrs. Ponnappa said in terms of what we did then and the lacunae we faced. However, I would say 2 or 3 points, quick points. One is, I don't think we should have a public national security. That I disagree. The rest of whatever she said, I completely agree. The national security doctrine or strategy, if you want to publish it, I'd love someone to tell me exactly what you would like to say in print about China. What are you going to say? It's going to be very, very difficult to frame that in a country where you are hugely export dependent. You have a massive problem there. So you can't come out and say, listen, yeah, if you do something, I'm going to, try and frame that. That is one. Second is, transparency is for the strong. Transparency is never for the weak. If you're strong, you like to advertise it. You will put out things in public. You'll say, I have this many tanks and this many aircraft and I will sort you out. If you don't have, you keep quiet. Shifting from that to Kargil per se, what did we learn from Kargil? Unfortunately, what we learned is that the institutions did not work together. That is the primary lesson. And that is, as Mrs. Ponnappa said, is something which you will still see not happening because that is the nature of institutions in this country and elsewhere. It's not just an Indian problem. You'll also see it, in fact, in the US. That is number one. Number two is there was this blame game saying that intelligence failure, which was not the case. In fact, I should tell you in this thing that in July in that year, the JIC, the Joint Intelligence Committee, had put out a briefing saying that Pakistan is going to try misadventure soon on the border. I mean, that was as specific as that. And we had given that warning. So it was not that it was a lack of intelligence. Number three is that where we seem to fail, and I don't want to talk about what is going on at present because since I'm not directly in the loop, I don't want to talk about it, is that we have a failure in terms of strategic intelligence gathering. Strategic in the sense, for example, again, going back to Kargil, we all knew that once the nuclear tests take place, Pakistan is going to try something. And this was evident in a number of inputs which we got. So that was strategic in nature from diverse sources and from a reading of Pakistan in general as to what it does. What is its method of, how does it work? That was the second thing. The third thing. The fourth thing is that we tend not to go, like Mrs. Ponnappa again said, is in terms of lessons learned. There were 4 attempts earlier prior to Kargil for a Kargil type operation, 4 times. And did we ever sit down and discuss why didn't we learn from that? That they were planning this 1985, then, it kept going on trying to occupy the heights in different ways, different points of time. They tried it, they failed. And still we were stuck with the mindset that the Pakistan army cannot occupy certain parts of this on the peaks because it is not feasible. You have to get rid of mindsets. In today's technological war, anything is possible. Okay, so that's what we have to cater for that. At the same time, do we have the manpower in a time of Agniveer to sort of pull our army across the slopes? We cannot. It is extremely terrible for the army, even being where it is. That is where technology comes in. So I heard a lot about we should go towards Malacca and blah blah, and I know all the rest of it, which is all fine. I mean, I'm sure we need to do all of that. But please remember, your defense budget is not going to go up hugely. That's not going to happen anytime in the next foreseeable future. So you have to manage with what you have. If you have to manage with what you have, then you need to go for learning from the actual lessons of the Ukraine war is faster and cheaper. Number 6, the 6th point I'm making is we can never catch up with China. It's not going to happen again in the foreseeable future, but maybe you can catch up in certain areas. I'm not going to specify those areas, but there are areas which you can identify that this is where the chink is and where I can pile up my forces. Again, in terms of surveillance, we are catching up. In terms of the NTRO, which was set up post-Kargil, it's an excellent organization. There is, again, a lacunae there, but it is in terms of technical stuff, we are good. Right. But, and my final point, I'm going to really stop here, is that there's a bunch of things I can take up during questions. You lack an analytical framework. You have amazing people in intelligence. When you want to put that together to form a picture, that is where you really need stuff, and that is where every country tends to fall back. If you look at some of the analysis, I think it's Steve Cole who did an analysis on 9/11, and the key point was this: nobody listened to the analysts. Because an analyst is not from CIA, he's not from blah, blah, he's not from X intelligence agency. He's just this loose person wandering around saying, what is this going on? I'm getting all this intelligence, there's a problem. 9/11, some of the analysts said that, look, these guys have come in, they've got pilot experience and all the rest of it, everything was there. Nobody listened. So I don't want to say what's going on now. I would suggest you need to strengthen your analyst framework. One big win post-Kargil was the creation of MAC, the multi-agency centers, where you force down the sharing of intelligence. An intelligence agency, by nature of its character, anywhere in the world, will not share intelligence. That is its nature. It's an intelligence agency. So to expect it that it's going to sort of throw out all this information is very difficult. It doesn't happen even sometimes at some very high level, sometimes. So the MAC system sort of made it into a daily sort of or weekly ritual where some amount of stuff was shared and a common picture emerged. Okay, this is happening. Let's look at this further. So that was a huge, huge win post-Kargil. If that process goes on and is refined, then that's great. And my last point is, let's admit to some of the failures, is that in Kargil, as you had a winter drawdown, that was what brought these guys came in, and 200, 600, they just walked in, right? You had no ARC cover. The VASO flights were completely stopped. So let's admit this. That was that was crazy. How could you leave a whole section of the border completely, not, why wouldn't you at least have the flights to look into that? So you cannot do this again. You have to have constant coverage. Again, like I said, some of the satellite capability which we've achieved is pretty good, but we need to be getting better. I'll stop there.
Been a great help because I think you're the only one who actually kept within the time schedule. So that has been help to me. But now I'm still out of time. So we have our own Karthik Bomkanti, who's our senior fellow here, who will be the last speaker out here. Karthik.
Yeah, that's one of the advantages as well of being the last speaker, because it just gives me an opportunity to, speak less, but and that also unburdens everyone. But I will keep my comments very cryptic as well. The lesson, I think, one of the critical lessons that I think the gains from the Kargil conflict really would be that India has managed at least to thwart Pakistan's misadventure again. And that is largely a function of also its response at that time. The way it responded, that's very crucial. Because what it did do is, it also reminded the Pakistanis of the costs of waging a war against India. And the Pakistanis have done it in the past. It's not that, okay, it's a motivated adversary, it's driven, it's visceral. But you have to remember, you have bought conventional peace for 25 years since 1999. Not sub-conventional peace. But I do believe that you've bought conventional peace from them, and that's an achievement, that's a gain. And the nature of our response was to a great extent and degree responsible for that. As far as concrete measures are concerned, I don't believe that, as far as the army is concerned, some of the measures taken, of course, by the army was to actually increase strength in many ways. It also increased the strength of its infantry. And I know a lot of army officers who made that point. It has, of course, and certainly the speakers earlier have also spoken about, how our ISR capabilities and other things have improved. But of course, when it comes to your ground strength, your ground operations capability, it's certainly improved vis-a-vis Pakistan. But it's also had a very deleterious effect in another way, the legacy of Kargil, as I see. And even Pakistan more generally in the last 30, 40 years, with all this terrorism and all this violence, and how the army has been bogged down, is that it's also had a distorting effect, especially on them, on their own priorities in dealing with the Chinese, and of course, our political leadership's inability to, also display some vision in dealing with how you're going to tackle China, because that's another challenge we have. And that's also a boundary problem. And there is also another contestant in Jammu and Kashmir, and that is China. And already we have a standoff there. So you really have challenges in the kind of priorities you have in terms of whether you need more lighter equipment in dealing with China, you need more advanced surveillance capabilities in dealing with the Chinese, because down the line, it's not just going to be Pakistan that we will face, but also as we are facing today with China. And that is something that India will have to look at very carefully, because in terms of the way it prioritizes defense, it'll have to be geared more towards what the Chinese are doing and many of the capabilities that we acquire against the Chinese are fungible. When I say fungible, they can be used against the Pakistanis as well. So if we keep the Chinese as the principal target of our acquisitions, of our defense planning, I think we can deal with several of the problems that the Pakistanis face, that we face against the Pakistanis. Not all. It is a real challenge, Pakistan, because the level of force that we have to meet, tackle every day almost. Look at what we've seen very recently with the attacks in Jammu. It's relentless. It just happens every now and then. And with China, at least we can keep that contained, notwithstanding what happened in Galwan, or what their attempts were in Yangtze and other places, and even in between, in Sikkim, for instance. But I think if we can do more in terms of dealing with China, some of the other problems with Pakistan in terms of our ISR and other things would significantly improve, and we will be able to keep things in line. But the subconventional challenge, I don't believe, is just going to go away, because it plays to Pakistan's strength, and Kargil proved that they cannot fight on India's terms, which they ended up doing, and they suffered heavy losses. So that's why repeating that exercise again What I would say, I'm not saying that it's never going to happen, but it's certainly something that has that they have, I think, learned from, at least at a strategic level, but also at an operational level, that if they do pick a fight with India, it's going to be really painful. So that is something that has been achieved, and I'd like to draw your attention to what a former IDF officer, he's retired now, Jonathan Shimshoni is a major general. He's quite active even now on Twitter, and he does commentaries as well. But he wrote a very good book on conventional deterrence, and he gave Israel's example itself. I wouldn't say Israel is a perfect example, but it has managed to secure conventional peace with some of its bigger neighbors, with Jordan, with Egypt. Those are gains, and not at the subconventional level. And that is a challenge, and that is something that we too face. But you must remember that repeated applications of force and failures of your adversaries, especially in this case Pakistan, has reminded the Pakistanis that they cannot just go on waging any conventional battle as and when they please. So that is one of the gains from Kargil. Also, and 25 years have gone by, it's an achievement, and that is a good thing. Whether it will last, I don't know, but it's I would say that is one of the key achievements. I'll stop here. I don't want to go too far further than that. We can give time for Q&A.
Thank you. Kargil, you've been better than Karthik, you've been better than a model in timekeeping, because now I'm just 5 or 6 minutes over the schedule, because that enables us to open this up to the audience here and get more responses. And I think then our panel can respond to this and come up with some more interesting stuff. But you're right with Pakistan that it's very frustrating when you see what's happening in Jammu and these areas, and those guys are coming from Pakistan, and there doesn't seem to be any deterrence or diplomacy which is able to, diplomacy or military capability, which is able to deter that kind of stuff. So it's kind of 4 killed here, 5 killed there, and you are unable to do anything. In any case, let's now throw this open to the audience here, and I'll take questions.
Thank you, Manoj. This thing about deterrence. Deterrence is the common word today. Everybody has used that word. And that brings me to saying that we have to go back to basics. I am not against height. I'm an infantry Gurkha officer. But that doesn't mean I don't appreciate the kind of things that the former chief or that Raj has said. But the fact is that in our quest for this high tech, we should not forget our basics. And we are forgetting our basics. And if it was not for our forgetting those basics, we wouldn't be having the kind of problems that the gentleman has just mentioned. Just 2 more comments, and I have a question for the former chief. In basics, I include the inclusion of the national security strategy or doctrine, or as the CDS calls it, national security policy. We have heard that 3 attempts were made, and for political reasons, those drafts were never saw the light of day. But I was surprised, in fact astonished, to listen to our current CDS actually say that we don't need, that we've lost that strategic ambiguity, whatever else that might garner for us, but he said it. And what surprises me is that how did he say it? Because he said it at some book release of a regimental officer that, We don't need a national security doctrine. After all, how did we do Balakot? How did we do 370? How did we do X, Y, and Z? And I completely agree with Leela Ponnappa that it is required. And as far as Tara's question about what will we say, of course we will say. What is it that we haven't already said? Our external affairs minister is perhaps the most articulate in foreign minister that we've had to date. He said a hell of a lot about China, and a lot of that can be said in our national security doctrine. So my second point is about funding. I mean, everybody is making that point, and we will then never be able to catch up. I don't know how we are going to do this, but if we don't do this, we will be minus conventional, strategic, all forms of deterrence. The Chinese will continue to bully us. And my last point about there is a lot of confusion on the ground between the defense minister, the national security advisor, and the PMO. There are three parallel channels that operate today. And I can give you many examples of this. And the most recent example is this fall in your manpower. We are today short of 3 lakhs. 3 lakhs, we are short of more than that numbers. And at the rate we are recruiting for Agniveer, that shortfall will remain. And with our disputed borders, somebody has to work that out. My question, Chief Marshal, is about this point that you made about Atmanirbharta. I have nothing against Atmanirbharta. In fact, late CDS Rawat had said, well, even if we have to accept second grade equipment, it's okay. I mean, this is a former CDS who said this. Ved Malik said, we'll fight with, as Raj mentioned, we'll fight with what we have got. I mean, we are talking about Viksit Bharat 2047. We are talking about the third largest economy shortly and the second largest soon. We have the money. We have to find ways to use that money rather than on winning elections. You can win elections, but you can lose wars. So my question on Atmanirbharta is this, that you are stuck at 31 squadrons for God knows how long. You cannot get your MRFA, your 114 aircraft. You've been trying. You haven't got an AON yet, right? And your current Vice Chief of Air Staff says that Atmanirbharta is very good, but not at the cost of security. So where is the contradiction here? And but one absolutely, I never get an opportunity to quiz a former chief. On this question of theaterization, traditionally, it's been the Air Force that's the sword stuck out as the sore thumb. Can you tell us that the Air Force is on board the current theaterization? Because CDS said it is imminent. You yourself said something very favorable towards that. Can you make a confirmation on that.
Good evening, sir. I am Colonel Vidur Sharma, sir. I am a serving army officer, currently as a visiting research fellow with the ORF. Courtesy General Shukla, sir. He started the serving officers go to the private think tanks. My questions, comment is with respect to Dr. Tara's comment. Pardon me in case it becomes a little emotional. I'll not go a little longer. In point form. You said that we can never catch up with China. I think if the Chinese would have having the similar thinking 25 years back, that China can never match US, they couldn't have been there where they are today. So I think that's a quite, I'll say, defeatist mentality. We may not be tomorrow, but maybe after 20 years. And nation's history, 20 years, 30 years are very, very, very small time. The second point with respect to the defense budget, ma'am, I believe the way you spoke that line, in fact, that is what has unnerved me. That's why I'm becoming a little emotional. That your defense budget is not going to be increased. It is going to be the way it is. It is not my defense budget, ma'am. It is your defense budget. It is everybody's defense budget. If you say my job is to show valor. What I'm trying to say, if you say my defense means I can only show valor. So that is what the soldiers are doing. They are dying or they are killing enemy, whatever they can do, but they can't compensate. The valor cannot compensate for technology. So that the nation has to think. So if the people who are sitting at the highest echelon use such line that your defense budget, I can understand. And the third point with respect to the intelligence available during Kargil. Ma'am, this I am telling with my own personal experiences. There is a difference in intelligence and information. There are two things only. If information has got specific locations and it is in time, then only it is an intelligence. Otherwise, it's of no value.
My question is to Marshal Badoria. Myself, Anangshu Mitra, I've been a journalist and a scholar. I look at India's foreign policy and widely write in Bangladesh and Afghanistan regularly for the national masthead. So my question is, we have seen the non-military preemptive surgical strike or non-military surgical strike. Given the situation right now and flow of irregulars along the LSE, and given the situation in Afghanistan, do you think we will be seeing such kind of attacks in coming days?
Evening. My name is Pavan. Sir, my question is regarding, in fact, you mentioned that we have moved forward from the Kargil in terms of intelligence coordination at the higher level, forming of CMG in case of crisis situation. The glaring example which faced right in front of us was the Pathankot airbase attack, where in fact many agencies, they were working together, but still in fact the objective was delayed. And then there was some agencies or some high level people who are working, micromanaging things which they are not supposed to do it. What is your thought on that?
Okay, now we'll have a round of responses, then we'll have a second and final round. So you don't have to respond, panel members, but unless you think it's important. So we'll do it the other way around now. I'll ask Karthik to start.
I'll say that I'll sort of address what Colonel Sharma did say that, yeah, that's very true. I do agree with one thing, that, capabilities matter. I take a very Clausewitzian view that strength is very, very important. I mean, you can talk about morale, you can talk about courage, you can talk about, tactical and operational virtuosity and, the coup d'CL as Clausewitz would put it. But ultimately, push comes to shove, numbers matter, strength matters. And that is something that you have to work on. And as I said earlier in my comments itself, that privilege China, increase the budget and make that the focus of your defense planning. Many of those capabilities are very much usable against Pakistan. Not all, but yes, many of them. And so that's where I stand on these issues. On the question of coordination, thing like that, I'll certainly defer to the Air Chief Marshal and others would be better positioned to
Tara?
answer that.
Yeah, very quickly. It's not a question, Karthik, that we should not. Of course we should. If I had the money, I would try like hell to catch up with China. And I wouldn't, obviously, I'm not going to expect the army to lay down their lives while I kind of tie up the purse and say, listen, you know what, you're not going to just increase the defense budget. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying you need a hard dose of reality. The reality is that for the time being, this government very wisely is focused on the economy. We don't want war. So your defense budget, while whatever they can possibly give you, they will. They always have. By the way, I've seen this in my 20 years. When the army asks for something, it is given. There are a number of issues in the process. That's a different issue. That is one. Of course, I'd love to catch up with China. But let's be realistic. I said in the foreseeable future. I didn't say forever. That is going to be our objective. And I'm sure we'll do it. But for a war fighting capability in the next few years, look at those areas where you are superior. That is what I'm saying. And there are areas where you can sort them out. And that is where you need to pour in money where it is cheap. I'm not going to go into specifics. Where it is cheap and fast and doable quickly. The intelligence, not information, please don't tell me. I've been dealing with intelligence for years. And there was intelligence at the point of time. It is not that it was not processed. That is the point I'm making. When if agencies, especially I should say, at that point of time, it is there in the Kargil Review Committee that the army, the MI did not give the intelligence at GIC meetings. They did not take it seriously. They did not know the extent of intrusion. So it's a question of sharing what you have. If you had NTRO at that time, we would have had a better picture. You have NTRO now, I'm sure you will do better. Intelligence is not information, I know. Okay, I'm going to stop there.
Ambassador Ponappa?
No, I really don't have much to add, but this notion of, catching up with China, it sounds catchy, but I think we really need to take a look at what we ourselves require in our area of operation and the threats that we perceive. There's so often this catching up with China extends to decision making, it extends to the nature of their economy and so on and so forth. But I think we have to function within the realities of what we have to do. But I would only stress this, that let us never get carried away by the hoopla of media, of events, and so on and so forth. And this is where, just to repeat myself, we require to be ruthlessly honest with ourselves. If there has been an intrusion, let's, at least amongst the decision makers, not say that it has not happened. Otherwise, in effect, what we are doing is, whether it's on the LAC or on the LOC, we've let people in, they've gone past the gate of the house, they've entered the door, and you're in effect negotiating for tiles in the living room or the kitchen. That's what it is. They are on your territory. This is the reality that we have to deal with, and we need to develop the capabilities at a time of our choosing, if we have that luxury, to correct things the way we would like to do. But for that, it requires mission mode decision making. One thing about some of the strategic industries that I think the Air Chief Marshal spoke about, there used to be a body called the National Manufacturing Competitiveness Council, which was in effect set up as a kind of parallel to the NSCS to deal with industry. And at a time when Mr. V. Krishnamurthy was heading it, there were 6 strategic areas that had been identified in terms of developing national security capabilities: shipbuilding, aircraft building, electronics, telecom. I forget what the other 2 were. And when we had a meeting on shipbuilding, I remember the representative from the Navy said, this is the first time ever that we have sat with industry to try to decide what defense needs. In this case, he talked about specialty steel, which he said sale promises, but then at the end of the day, they reneged and we had to import it. The point is this dialogue, the civil-military dialogue at all levels, within government, within professionals, within industry, has to take place in order to develop these things in terms of a mission mode, decision making. I mean, just saying I'm going to set up a fab factory is not enough. What about the infrastructure all around? What about the people that you get in? Now, ISRO has demonstrated that you don't necessarily need an IIT US return person in order to reach the moon. But you've got to develop these groupings and these capabilities in order to take things forward. And as for the defense budget, I've heard this before.
In the next round, we can discuss that.
Okay, I just have one point on the defense budget. We always hear this, that yes, it will not be increased or it will just keep pace with inflation and so on. In fact, at the NDC, when I was on the faculty there, one of the study groups was tasked to do it. And as their SDS, I said, you shall not do it. It doesn't matter. So the commandant said, well, no, this was the mandate. I said, sorry, we don't accept it. You've got to push it. And it's only when you get the political leadership into seeing what is required, not just with the laundry list of what China has or Pakistan has, therefore we must have it, but in terms of the scenarios that you develop, whether it is, well, frankly, my nightmare scenario of a Chinese expeditionary force in the Andamans, or actually looking at your coastline as your longest frontier, which is what it is.
So let me just, pick on three issues. One is this defense budget. The problem with taking an excessively economic view of the budget is this, that we assume that geopolitics is constant. So Angela Merkel thought that she could buy peace by buying Russian gas, but geopolitics trumped economics. So I really don't understand what is this. Is it wise to spend less on defense before 62? Or is it wiser to hike your budget after 62? It's absolute common sense. So I'm not saying that you should do it always, but when you are seeing trends in geopolitics, when you are seeing trends move towards conflicts, it is wiser to spend on deterrence. You will end up spending less on war. As countries like USA, why they spend more? Because they have had economists with interest in strategic affairs. Andrew Marshall. So here is a near Nobel laureate in economics who also has a strategic worldview. In our case, it is the other way around. And therefore, we end up spending less on defense when we should. And this is really an argument which should be really debated because it lies at the heart of the matter. As I said, valor needs to be funded. There are limits to valor. This is one point. The other issue is, this point which General Mehta raised, a very valid point, 31 squadrons. This is exactly why we must, leverage what is asymmetric addressal. If you had 31 high-end squadrons and 10 squadrons of drones, see where you would be. But today we don't even have that capacity in drones. So there are two routes. One is to buy high-end systems. There is enough combat power in low-level asymmetricity. See what the Houthis are doing. See what the Iranians are doing with cheaper drones. So there needs a lot of, imagination and national security. This could be done. Just 30 seconds more. One is, these arguments are never this versus that. For example, I haven't understood the argument of troops versus technology. Nobody's ever saying that. It is always technology complementing troops. The big error that happened what's happening in J&K today is because we moved the whole RR division out. And this is exactly what happened in Kargil. So we should not commit these same, mistakes again. One last point I'll make about this national security strategy. By all means, you must have a national security strategy. Somebody should write it. You tell me and Air Marshal Bhadura will write it in 45 days. What is so great about it? But somebody doesn't write it. And if a national security strategy is not written, does it mean we have nothing in our heads? Of course, the chiefs have it in their heads. They know what to do. So while it is extremely important, it can resource it. If you read the Prime Minister's address to the combined commanders of 2015, it is as good a national security strategy as you will get. Please read it. What else is somebody going to say? So while I am for national security strategy, by all means, national security strategy, if it is not written, it doesn't mean that nothing will happen. These are some of the submissions I wanted to make. Thank you.
Firstly, before I come to Atmanirbharta, your points very valid. I think Chief CDS, what he mentioned on national security policy, I've heard him mention this, but his sense was what Ms. Tara has conveyed, that it need not be in public domain.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
I can tell you that please don't be under the impression there is nothing. Okay, so I will leave it at that ambiguous statement. Okay, so the fact that it is not in public domain doesn't mean it, there is nothing like national security strategy or, how we function. So it's very clear. So don't worry about it. On Atmanirbharta, also on Vice Chief, sir, you mentioned Atmanirbharta, he said, not on national security. I was there, this was the air defense seminar when he mentioned this. And don't go by newspaper reports which were totally twisted. Therefore, he means that we should import aircraft. It was said in the context, he was addressing the industry. And he said, look, don't strangle. The sense was that what you build in technology, don't strangle the Air Force, that this is all we can do. Okay. Our air defense capability requires us to have a certain technology, and you should build towards that. And it was in that sense. But obviously, when it comes to media, it has taken some different line that he mentioned that it is in this form. And let me tell you, I was there in that seminar. Okay. On Atmanirbharta, I think critical is, we are at 31 squadron, yes. If you give me an unlimited budget today, and we put it anywhere, deploy it in India and deploy it anywhere in the world, it will take us 15 years to get to, let's say, if we say 42 squadron, 15 years. And we would, in that 15 years, we would still not cross 33, 34. Thereafter, we will reach. These are the cycles, time cycle. Okay, so we shouldn't worry too much. The issue is what kind of aircraft, what tech, what kind of weapons, and that we have taken enough precaution. So while we have 31 squadron, the kind of tech and weapons we have changed. On Atmanirbharta, the issue is this. We can forever keep saying that, look, I need this capability, therefore get me this from abroad and I will give it to my industry later. Or it is 10% short. But we have to take this leap of faith. We have to say, okay, I stop buying and I will only give to industry and you please produce. It will come to a certain level, okay, maybe 5% short, and thereafter the next level will come. If you don't take that leap of faith, it will never happen. I wish we had done 20 years back, we wouldn't be discussing it today. So today we should do it blindly. The next generation of scholars sitting in this conference room 20 years from now will say, okay, look, it has happened. Okay, and similarly, I don't have to match China, but we have to worry about what we want to develop for our needs and develop it. I think an issue was made about surgical strike, whether we'll do current scenarios. I have no knowledge. Okay, but if something like this continues to happen, I'm sure a lot of work is happening about dealing with it. Yes. On theatre ground, of course. When CDS says that everybody is on board, then everybody is on board. So that we need not, because a lot of discussion has taken place, and he said very clearly. That's so, because you see, we have to realize when we say Air Force not on board, it is not Air Force not on board. It is the air power issues must be adequately tailored in whatever theatre structure that you form. The issues with utility of air power, its flexibility, and how we will utilize. And look at what is happening today. What is everybody in each service looking for today? UAVs, loiter ammunition, this capability, a little more visibility in the air, all assets of air power. That is the character of war changing. Every soldier would need, issues that are part of the air power. So when you integrate, all those issues will get tailored. So firstly, we should just forget that we should copy US, we should copy so-and-so. We should see what are our threats integrate other, and we are severely short of resources, all three services. Don't think only Air Force. But we need to put it together, integrate, and see the sum is greater. And that is happening. I think we've gone well beyond that point. On surgical strikes, with all this happening now, I think we would ask, so I'm sure everything is being tackled, a lot of movement taking place. The issue is, I think we need to, this conventional thing has been tackled in demonstration of our capability, and deterrence has worked. We've had, extended peace. The subcon needs to be tackled, I think, very strongly, differently. A lot of tech needs to come in, a lot of visibility, and we have to change our culture to say that not a single life lost is acceptable. I think we need to go towards that and deal with that. That is tech build-up. But what is happening currently, I'm sure Army is dealing with it, and when the time is right or situation demands, necessary action will be taken like the last time. I have no knowledge with what is currently happening, no discussion with the people concerned. Okay, I'm just assessing that they are doing the needful. Pathankot was a issue. Okay, again, Pathankot was mentioned by Aapne. It was, a lot of agencies working. And again, a lot of failures in terms of how we deal with airfield security, how we deal with, VAVP security, a lot of lessons. And as far as, if you ask me, as Air Force, what was it? It is a matter of shame for us. No, not only that. It was shame for Air Force as such that somebody has jumped into your. Finally, they were inside the boundary. No, so we have a responsibility to see nothing moves in, and there was an issue of some inputs were available which didn't come in time and all that. Later on, everything moved together, and then necessary action was taken. But this is something that this is a nature of threat that we have to start building ourselves to deal with. And I think we have to get into a lot of tech. When we say 24/7 ISR, it also means 24/7 knowledge of what is happening around us. I'll stop there. I think we're short on time, but...
I think I'm completely out of time. That's the problem. So I'm not going to take any questions. I'm just going to wind this up. But I think everyone, you've all got an opportunity to respond to the questions. Because I know if I take a second round, then we'll go on till 6 o'clock or something like that. But in conclusion, all I'd like to say is that I think this has been a very useful discussion. I think it's an important aspects of understanding that, when you have the integration, what is the role of air power out there? Like it or not, air power is very central to military power these days. So in whatever way, in whatever shape, it will be utilized in our emerging context. You can be sure that it will be in the more optimal fashion. National security strategy has been spoken about. I often speak to students in the Asian College of Journalism, and their final term paper is, why do we need an NSS? And I think why we need an NSS, the very important part of it, it's true that there is a strategy, meaning people work along a strategy. The thing is that you need an NSS because in this vast country and this vast bureaucracy, everyone ought to be on the same page. The problem is that if I'm living in Mizoram, for me, Myanmar is the most important challenge, Myanmar or Bangladesh. But if I'm living in Gujarat, I have a different perspective. So if we are talking of a national security strategy, we need someone at a central point to be shaping it and to be giving it a certain shape and to implement it in a certain way, and also optimal utilization of resources. How do you prioritize resources? I mean, do you need it for air power today, or should we go in for naval submarine strength? So there are many issues involved, and that is why the NSS is very important. But in any case, we can always discuss this for a very long time. National security is something which affects all of us, but we have to bring this to a close. And I'd like to invite all of you for a cup of tea. But before that, please give a hand to our panel.